everyone, bom dia a todos. Welcome aboard Motor Yacht Andresa. Bem-vindos a bordo Motor Yacht Andresa. Today we're going to be talking about money, moolah, the thing that it costs to keep a motor yacht running. Now, most yacht owners are very cagey sometimes about saying how much they spend on their yachts, how much they spend to keep them. And I must admit, I was a little trepidatious myself about doing this particular video, but only because my husband's going to watch it and it's not exactly like a new dress or a handbag that I can pull the old, oh, this tatty thing's been in the back of the wardrobe for years, darling, on him. So, at the peril of my domestic harmony, let's crack on and tell you what it costs to keep and own Motor Yacht Andresa. We're going to cover three things today. We're going to cover the cost of keeping a boat like this. Doesn't matter whether it's a new boat, whether it's a used boat, the things you just can't avoid paying. We're then going to look at how much it costs to go cruising or how you're going to use the boat. We'll then compare it to my last boat, which was about half the size, and you can see how the costs scale up when you've got a larger boat with more engines and more systems on board and how much more it costs. And that's a rule of thumb you can follow through for much larger yachts as well. And then again, after we finish with that, we're going to look at what the difference is between a new boat and a used boat with the economics and whether or not it works out. And we'll deal specifically with my experience on that. So before we get started, let's start where we need to. There are certain costs that you're going to have to pay. No matter what type of boat it is, you're going to need somewhere to keep it. Unless you live on the waterfront in Fort Lauderdale and you can park it at the bottom of your garden, that's usually not an option for most people. You're going to have to pay for marina fees. And marina fees vary greatly depending on what type of marina they are. We're here in Marina de Albufeira in the south of Portugal, and this is a reasonably priced marina. It's a deep water marina, which is very important in this part of the world. We're not in the Med, we have tides here, so you can get in and out of this marina 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, irrespective of what the tides are doing. There are much cheaper marinas than this. There are vastly more expensive marinas than this. But for Andresa's got a home berth for a 12-month contract here. It costs 7,200 euros per year for a 16-metre berth, and that includes all of your electricity and all of your water. Many marinas you have to pay for those separately, but it's an all-encompassing price here. You can go 10 kilometres down the road, you know, it's roughly about 8 nautical miles down the road, and in Villamora, and the price is about 30% more expensive. And there are other reasons why I picked this particular marina, but I'll go into those in another video. You can go to one of the yachting hubs like Palma or to Antibes, and it will be 5-6 times the price of this for the same boat. The same is true if you want to go to Puerto Banús in Marbella. You can guarantee it's going to cost you 5 or 6 times the cost it would here. I particularly don't think those marinas are any better than this one. It's just people like to pay for location. So it makes very little difference to the actual boat. The other thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to insure the boat. And to insure Andresa for a year costs 1,900 euros, exactly, to the penny, or to the cent if you will. And that covers for all Atlantic waters, Mediterranean waters, not further than 10 degrees east. 10 degrees east will take you about as far as the Spezia and Viareggio in Italy, so you covered all of France, all of Monaco, you covered the Balearic Islands, you've covered all of Spain, you've covered Sardinia and Corsica. That's absolutely fine. If you wanted to go to Greece or to Turkey or into the Adriatic and cruise Croatia, then you'd need to expand the cover and you'd pay an additional premium for that. But there's no point, given that we don't go there at all that often. In fact, we've not been for the last 4 years that far. So there's plenty to go at. There's no need in spending money when you don't need to. That's one thing that's always important to remember. When you have a yacht, it will find ways to spend your money. You don't have to look for new ways to do it. The other things that you're going to have to do is to keep the yacht serviced and maintained. And if you're looking at just generally servicing a yacht at the size of Andresa, a 50-foot twin-engine motor yacht, and she's a sports cruiser, so she's no flybridge. In those circumstances, you're going to have to pay servicing charges no matter what type of boat you've got, whether it's new or whether it's used. And those things include things like keeping it maintained, servicing the engines, servicing the generators, polishing the hull, and just generally upkeep of the yacht. Anti-fouling every year, lifting her out of the water, paying for the crane to do that, and an average service is around about 6,000 euros. We usually pay for much more than that because the things go wrong with wear and tear and you're paying other things, but we'll deal with those a little bit later in this video. So those are the types of things that you then have to pay every year. In addition, you have to pay other things like cleaning, and I pay somebody a couple of days a week to come in and just clean Andrezza when I'm not here. Obviously when I'm here and I'm about, myself and my the lady who cruises with me, Susanna, will come and we will clean her wherever possible, but I also pay somebody to come a couple of times a week and just wash her decks down, soak them down and rinse her off, just to keep the dust down and to make sure that she's in top condition. That costs me roughly about €2,000 a year for that service. Most marinas have these services. You can find somebody, they'll pop in, they'll spend an hour hosing her down, quick scrub, clean the windows, hose her off again, and you're fine. You don't need to sit there shamming it down every day. We can do that when Susanna and I come on. If you've got full-time crew, they can be doing it for you. So those are the sorts of things. If you're here in Portugal, there is also a couple of taxes that you have to pay. One of the taxes that you have to pay here, if you're here in a boat for more than 7 days, you have to pay the Impostos de Farolagem, which is a tax for the lighthouse systems here in Portugal. It's not expensive, it's about €70 a year. If you're here for about a month, you can pay about €2 for it, and it's available from the Capitania's office in your local village next to the marina usually. And that is something that you need to have on board, because there is a fine if you don't pay that. The GNR can come on board, or the Maritime Police, and they can fine you up to €1,000 for not having that tax paid. It's right and proper we pay it anyway. We all use the waterways here, and it's a very rocky coast, especially further west, and the lighthouses serve a very valuable service here. As well as that, if you have a foreign registered boat, or if you have a private boat here, it doesn't apply to commercially registered boats, but there is something called Impostos Único Circulação, which is effectively a tax based upon the engines, and it's a charge of about €1.2 for every kilowatt of power your engines put out. There's a very complex mechanism for working that out, but effectively the tax for Andrezza would be somewhere in the region of about €3,200. Now that tax can be avoided, not evaded, quite legally avoided. If you're a foreign registered boat, as Andrezza is, she's flagged in the Port of London, she's Part 1 registered there, then if she's not in Portuguese waters for more than 189 days consecutively, the tax can be avoided. You don't need to pay it. And given that the coast of Spain is literally 52 nautical miles east from here, a €700 round trip in diesel and an overnight in Ayamonte just across the border is a much more pleasant way to spend money than it is to give it to the taxman, which is what we do. We were in Ayamonte just before the end of February, so sometime before August, and we'll be going into the Med as soon as July hits and everything opens up. We'll be out of Portuguese waters, and that tax won't be payable this year, so that's fine. And then there are various other bits and pieces that you have to have, such as bits and pieces like sundries that you have to keep the boat going, buying polish and things like that. But if you said say €300 or €400 a year for soaps and polishes and everything else, that gives you a round total of about €19,300 there or thereabouts per year. That's just to keep the yacht stood still. So about €20,000 a year just to keep it stood where it is. We've not put any fuel in it, we've not gone anywhere, we've not paid any crew. That's us doing the things ourselves. And so you can see how those costs can mount. If you're going to get yourself a skipper, you're going to have to pay him somewhere in the region of around €20,000 to €25,000 for the season or something like that, over a 6 to 8 month season, and you can add that to it. We skipper ourselves. The whole reason I have a yacht is because I love navigating, I love being in command of the vessel, so that's why we do it. So once we've got that, you then have to think about how are we going to use the yacht. Now, lots of people just want to have a yacht to cruise up and down to the local anchorages, the bays. There's some beautiful coastline along here. Most people don't go more than about 20 to 25 nautical miles east and west from here the whole season. They're out there. And if you did that in Andrezza, Andrezza's fuel tanks are 2,000 litres. It costs around €2,800 here to fill her up, because diesel is quite cheap at the moment. If you're closer to Gibraltar and you can obtain your marine diesel tax-free, it's about £800, about €1,000 to fill Andrezza there. And if you did that, you could probably cope with a year pottering up and down the coast and spend no more than about €4,000 a year for that. If you want to go cruising, and we tend to go cruising quite a bit, so we like to take out, if we're going on a cruise, if we were to go from here, which again is on the Atlantic, we're not in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean is a good 160 nautical miles southeast from here. If we did that and then went beyond there and say to the Balearics, we went to Ibiza, Formentera and Palma, and then back for what would be effectively a 3-week cruise, because you don't want to slog yourself to death on those things, it would rush somewhere in the region of about €10,000 in diesel to do that. And then on top of that, you'd have your other expenditures such as marina fees while you're away from your home berth. If you were staying in Marina Ibiza, if you were staying in Banús on the way there and places like that, you could probably factor in a further, I don't know, maybe €3,000 for expenses and things like that whilst you're out. So a decent 3-week cruise will cost you somewhere in the region of €13,000 thereabouts. And those are the sort of costs that you've got to factor in every year if you're going to use a boat. So if you're self-crewing, you're probably talking somewhere in the region of about €35,000 to €40,000 a year. If you're going to have a crew and pay a skipper to do it yourself on a boat this size, you wouldn't need more than one crew. You could help out yourself afterwards. Then in those circumstances, you were going to cost you somewhere in the region of about €55,000 to €60,000 a year to operate a boat like Andresa. So how does that compare with a smaller boat? Well, if we examine my last boat, a boat was called Malaika. She was a Dorel Monticello, 25 feet long, about half the size of Andresa, single engine boat, big V8 petrol. We kept her in the same marina. Her operating costs a year were under €10,000. In fact, they were about 8 most years. It's much easier to look after yourself. It's much easier to service. It's much cheaper to lift and to keep and to have a smaller berth. Much cheaper to run on the fuel with a single engine. Much cheaper to service. And those are the things that you're looking at. So running Andresa is probably 4 to 5 times the cost of a boat half her size. And the same would be true if you move up. So my costs for looking after and servicing Andresa being about €20,000. If we go up, as we're planning to do next year, to a much larger boat, to a 22 to 24 metre boat, we're probably looking at somewhere in the region of around €45,000 to €50,000 a year to service, plus the other expenditure, and that boat will require crew, so that's going to be a little more expensive, but these are the breaks. If you're going to own these toys, they're very expensive. It's going to cost money. You have to excuse me if I take a drink every now and then. I've been sleeping with the air conditioning on. It's very hot down here in Portugal at the moment. So you can see how that sort of stacks up and how that moves on. So then, what's the difference between owning a yacht that's brand new or a yacht that's used? And we'll take Andresa as an example. Andresa is a boat built by Cranky. She was built in 2008 and launched in 2009, so she's 11 years old now. I've owned her for the last 6 years, so she was 5 years old when I bought her. She'd been taken care of in absolute pristine condition. The chap had never used her. He'd put about 120 hours on it in 5 years. And effectively, when we came on board, most of the kit that was down in the galley, etc., was still wrapped in the saran wrap in the cling film that it came in the plastic that it came in. It was in pristine condition. She'd been well serviced and well looked after. I paid €310,000 for her. When she was new 5 years earlier, I still have a bill of sale from Cranky, she was €750,000. So in that time, she'd lost around €440,000 in depreciation alone, and she was in pristine condition. So that's a hell of a hit from buying a new boat. But then you have to factor in the things that you have when you have an older boat. Things start to wear out. You have to increase and pay for maintenance and things. And the things that we've looked at going wrong, there is still depreciation when you buy a used boat. So buying a used boat, it depreciates still, but at a much, much slower rate than it would have otherwise. And if we're looking here at Andresa, the money we've spent on her, things that have had to go wrong, that we've had to pay for, that we wouldn't had we had a new boat, because they either wouldn't have broken, or if they had, they would have been covered under manufacturer's warranty and fixed for free. We've probably spent around €40,000 on her, doing things that we wouldn't have otherwise had to do to a new boat. Things like in 2018 we had all the hull repainted. The blue paint suffers greatly here in the sun, so we had to have a hull repainted. That was around €10,000. We had a starter motor go on us once. When it engaged, it wouldn't disengage, and the engine just tore it to pieces. That was an expensive, but an interesting story. I'll tell you that one another time, because we had a very interesting tale that followed on from that, and a great adventure because of it, and I'll tell you about that separately. We had some things like air conditioning pumps replaced. We had the vacuum systems on the toilets replaced at one point, primarily though because some young lady who was staying with us as a guest decided to put some sanitary products down the toilets after being told not to, and they reacted very badly to those things. That was about €5,000 or €6,000. We've just had the belts that drive the retractable roof replaced from Bezzanzoni. That was quite an expensive job, a couple of €1,000 for replacing a couple of rubber bands, but you have to crane the roof off. That's an expensive job. And we've had other bits and pieces done. So if we said €40,000 effectively is what we've spent, more or less. On top of that, she's depreciated by about €90,000. So she's worth about €220,000 now. And if we add that and take it away from the first hit, so had I bought a Andrezza new at £750,000, I'm still around £280,000 to £300,000 the richer for having bought a used boat than having bought a new boat. Would I buy a new boat? Possibly, depending on whether or not I was retiring completely. I'm going to spend a good deal more time on it. But as I spend only partially my time on here, I'm not here full time. And backwards and forwards, I still have lots of business interests. I don't intend to waste that much money having a boat sitting in a marina going nowhere, just depreciating. I came from very humble beginnings, and whilst you can take the girl out of Manchester, it's very difficult to take the Manchester out of the girl. There are people who do that. There are people who own 30-metre yachts. You'll see them in the marinas just around here, where they sit there and they never go anywhere. The covers never come off them. All that happens is the crew clean them every day, and they literally, if they go out of the marina once or twice a year, that's it. It's absolute madness as far as I'm concerned, so I wouldn't do that. So I'm looking for a new yacht. The chances are I would look for another used yacht, make sure she's been well taken care of, make sure she's been well maintained, etc. So you can see the sort of money that you're spending now to keep these kind of yachts in the marinas, to operate them, to keep them going. And in those circumstances then, you're going to need to put aside somewhere in the region of about 30 to 40,000 euros a year to operate a 50-foot motor yacht down here in Portugal. That would increase vastly if you, as I say, if you were on Tibes, if you were in Monaco, if you were in Palma, Mallorca, if you were in Puerto Banús. So keep that in mind when you're buying a yacht. It doesn't end with the purchase price. Hopefully this will be the last video for a few days from the marina. From next week the seaways open up to Pleasurecraft again after the lockdown, and we will be getting out. We're not allowed to leave international waters just yet though, but we will be able to get up and down the coast, and we'll show you some of the coastlines, some of the great places to go and visit here down on the Algarve coast, and we'll show you the sort of fun we have out with Andrezza. Hope to see you again soon, guys. Thanks very much for watching. Please remember to subscribe. Please remember to like. Thank you.